Welcome back to the Conyong podcast by the nation's number one Konyo, Neil Jokas. This is your daily briefing on Usaping Panlipunan, where we invite different people who come from different walks of life and ask them about their views and perspectives sa mga issues ng ating society. For today's Konyong podcast episode, I have invited four of my not so Konyo friends, but I still invited them anyways as they are brainy people coming from FEU to talk about the topic, is press freedom a myth? Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Adara, Anju, Lay, and Sarah. Woohoo! Hello ladies, welcome to the program.
Hi guys, how are you?
What is up, everyone?
Magandang araw po to our podcast listeners.
Thank you. Thank you for having us around.
Ayan, now that we are all settled, perhaps we can now start discussing about the topic, is press freedom a myth? Maybe Ange, you can start by giving us a brief background on press freedom.
Okay, as we all know naman, press freedom is a fundamental component of any functioning democracy. A free press serves as a watchdog that may look into allegations of misconduct by the government and publicize its findings. It is also a thriving marketplace of ideas, a platform for regular folks to express themselves, and a medium through which may they get exposure to a broad variety of information and perspectives. It comes with the liability of knowing the truth and addressing the truth only.
Alright, thank you for the warmer, Ate Ange. Perhaps we can now move on to opening the discourse about who agrees and disagrees to press freedom being a myth. Lay?
Alam mo ba, Neil, I would say yes, press freedom is a myth. Why? Well, the concept of press freedom is occurring less than it seems. It exists when the various forms of media operate freely without government control. However, guys, we are blinded by the media as it only shows the surface level of what we need to see. Or I would rather say that the things they are showing us are filtered by someone. Kaya masasabi ko na ang press freedom doesn't exist because the media is a slave and will always be a slave to the government or the groups higher than the government. Believe it or not, our world is controlled by someone who doesn't want ordinary people to know about their doings. And madagdag ko lang guys ha, yung mga media broadcasting this particular matter immediately results in extermination or worst case scenario, death. Remember Marlene Garcia Esperat? She is a Filipino whistleblower and an investigative journalist. She is the one responsible sa mga weekly news about anti-corruption. And ang kabayaran ng work niya is she was murdered inside her home on March 24, 2005 sa harap ng dalawa niyang anak. Imagine the trauma. Despite that unfortunate event, what's good is after a year of trial, 3 out of 4 nung pumatay sa kanya admitted na binayaran sila ng 120,000 pesos to murder her. Thus, they were sentenced to 30 years without parole. What about you, Adara? What's your take?
Sa akin naman, I think press freedom is not necessarily a myth but a possibility. It's just that with the government that we have here in the Philippines, it makes us believe that press freedom is a myth. Kasi bakit nga ba importante ang media? 'Di ba, for us to know things that we need to know sa mga nangyayari sa society natin and to be the government's watchdog. Actually, I agree with Zeddy na madalas media operates by being controlled by someone because yun na nga yung naging norm. Pero hindi naman laging tama ang norm, di ba? Actually, I do believe that we have the power to stand up against people wanting to control media. Kasi kahit konti lang sila, there are reporters and journalists naman who work by integrity. Some examples would be Maria Ressa. Diba, she stood up to the government despite the threats given to her. And then there's also Percy Lapid na he questions the present administration. Although hindi nga maganda yung kinalabasan, but I do believe that these journalists could serve as stepping stones to press freedom. And lalo na if us, the citizens, also stand up against this kind of things. I do believe that there's a possibility for press freedom. It's just that today there are so many hindrances pa. And in addition, I do believe that it should also start sa government din. Kasi yung mga problems na nabanggit ni Zeddy, kung maayos naman yung mga tao sa government natin and nandun yung mga gustong mag-achieve ng press freedom, then it will no longer be a possibility but a reality.
Alright, great insights we have from Ate Lay and Ate Adara. Thank you, Ates. Now that we have heard of Lay's and Adara's perception towards press freedom and their stances on it, perhaps we can now hear from Sarah to assess a middle ground based on their answers. Sarah?
Yes, ayan. So actually, Lay and Adara do have a point. It is true when Lay agreed that press freedom is a myth and the press will always be a slave to the government. There are indeed cases of unfortunate crimes and events that waste up oppression on the press. Just like the one that Lay explained earlier. Tama ba? So, however, Adara disagreed and also mentioned that press freedom is rather a possibility than a myth. You have two opposing points, but they actually meet at the end. And the common ground between your arguments sits on the fact that the government plays a huge role to whether how do we perceive freedom of expression, when in fact, there is no law that allows the government to intervene with whatever content that the press displays. Now, taking into account the famous quote by an American journalist, A.J. Liebling, I quote, freedom of the press belongs to the man who owns one. In the Philippine settings, we actually made this idea true, seeing that most of our mainstream press is driven by substantial news, while the rest are just mere capitalists that depends their content on what excites the general public and accepts propaganda from the higher ups. Kaya naman sobrang nakaka-proud talaga malaman na there are still press that upholds truth despite the threats that they are receiving.
Ayan. Thank you very much everyone for sharing your thoughts and sentiments on today's podcast episode on Ang Conyong Podcast. Talagang totoo nga. Press freedom is such a big and controversial topic. Everybody in a democratic country such as ours can debate and argue on. Kaya to all of our devoted listeners, sa aking mga kakonyo out there, let us continue upholding the truth by learning the truth, experiencing the truth, and speaking the truth so that we may walk in the truth. And from there, we safeguard the very essence of democracy, our voices. Ladies and gentlemen, let us give our speakers a round of applause. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you!
Thank you.
Once again, this has been your host, the nation's number one conyo, Neil Jokas. Thank you and see you in the next episode.